you ever heard of a love so controlling, so jealous, that it slowly turns into something far darker, something deadly? This is the story of Blake Leibel and Iana Kasian. A relationship that began with charm and promise, but spiraled into obsession, manipulation, and unimaginable violence. What started as overprotectiveness and jealousy eventually became a meticulously planned act of brutality that shocked an entire city. 26th, 2016. A seemingly ordinary day in West Hollywood, until police forced their way through a barricaded apartment door and stepped into a scene that defied comprehension. What was supposed to be a routine missing person investigation quickly spiraled into one of the most horrifying discoveries the city had ever witnessed. Inside the apartment, Blake Leibel, heir to a multi-million-dollar Canadian fortune, sat unnervingly calm, as if nothing were amiss, beside the mutilated body of his fiancé, Iana Kasian. The 30-year-old mother had been scalped, tortured, and left barely recognizable. But what makes this story even more chilling isn't just the horror of that night. It's the dark, methodical plan investigators would uncover. A blueprint Blake had been meticulously crafting for years, leading to a crime of unspeakable brutality. Today, on True Crime X, we peel back every layer of this terrifying story, a story that will linger in your mind long after the video ends. So hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and brace yourself. This is the story of Iana Kasian, a life stolen in the most shocking and brutal way imaginable. But to really understand this case and the heartbreak behind it, we have to know who Iana Kasian was before the tragedy. She was born in Kiev in 1986, a city that was still part of the Soviet Union, where opportunities were limited and life demanded resilience. Growing up in that environment shaped Iana into someone disciplined, focused, and determined to rise above the hardships that surrounded her. After earning her law degree, she built a respected career as a prosecutor, specializing in tax crimes for the Ukrainian government, a role that required boldness, precision, and incredible courage. She carried herself with a calm confidence and a strong sense of justice that made her stand out among her peers. Outside of work, Iana's strongest bond was with her mother, Olga. They spoke every single day, without exception. Whether it was reassurance, advice, or simple mother-daughter comfort, their connection was unbreakable. To Iana, her mother was her anchor and her daily guide. But like many people searching for something bigger, Iana dreamed of a life beyond what she had known. She wanted more than survival. She wanted possibility. That dream eventually brought her to California. For Iana, moving to the United States wasn't just about chasing new opportunities. It was about building a future where her child could grow up with the security, education, and freedom that her own generation had been denied back home. America wasn't just a new chapter, it was hope. To those who knew her, Iana was ambitious, loving, and incredibly cautious, the kind of woman who planned, who protected, who tried to do everything right. But even the most careful person can't always recognize danger when it walks into their life disguised as charm. Because while Iana was building a future based on hope and hard work, another story was unfolding in Los Angeles, one that would soon collide with hers in the most devastating way imaginable. Blake Leibel came from a world Iana never knew: wealth, privilege, and a life where consequences rarely applied. As the heir to a multi-million-dollar Canadian fortune, Blake moved through Los Angeles like someone who expected the world to obey him. He drifted through Hollywood circles, writing screenplays and creating graphic novels steeped in dark, twisted themes. stories that would later feel disturbingly close to reality. To outsiders, Blake seemed like every other Hollywood creative. Eccentric, imaginative, maybe even misunderstood. But beneath that surface was something far more unsettling. A growing obsession with control, with dominance, and with the kind of violence he once only wrote about. So when Iana and Blake's lives finally intersected, they came from opposite worlds. Iana, a new mother searching for stability and a safe future. Blake, a man drifting deeper into his own twisted fantasies, untethered from reality. Their connection should have been impossible. Yet somehow, their paths crossed, intertwined, and set in motion a tragedy no one could have ever predicted. When Iana met Blake, she was in a hopeful phase of her life, rebuilding in California, working, dreaming, and trying to create something stable for her future family. But what she didn't realize at first was that Blake was still involved with model Amanda Braun, who was pregnant with his second child. When he told Iana that their relationship was over, she hesitated. She suspected there was more to the story, but Blake knew how to smooth things over. He provided her with a comfortable home, a luxurious car, and the promise of a secure future, the kind of stability she wanted for the child she hoped to raise in a country where she could give her daughter the education and safety her own generation had been denied back in Ukraine. Slowly, Iana let her guard down, and when she became pregnant with their daughter in late 2015, she was genuinely happy. It felt like everything she had worked for, a family, a fresh start, a future, was finally coming together. She fell in love completely. Iana was always extremely close to her mother. There wasn't a day they didn't talk. Even after moving so far from home, their bond stayed the same. So when she shared her pregnancy news, her mother felt both joy and relief, believing her daughter was finally settling into the life she deserved. But when Iana gave birth to Diana in May 2016, everything shifted. Instead of stepping into fatherhood, Blake grew jealous, almost resentful of the attention Iana gave the newborn. His mood changed quickly. Arguments started over small things and escalated into controlling behavior. His jealousy worsened to the point where he demanded that Iana take her 3-week-old baby to her mother's apartment, the same apartment he had rented for Olga, because he felt ignored. The worst part is, Iana was still recovering from her C-section, barely able to move comfortably, yet Blake started making demands that no new mother should ever face. He pushed her to be sexually available, ignoring her pain completely. And whenever she resisted, he'd hit her with emotional threats, saying he'd leave her for another woman if she didn't give him what he wanted. What began as a promising new chapter slowly turned into something darker. Blake started isolating himself in his penthouse, shutting out friends, and keeping Iana inside the apartment for long stretches. Every time she tried to leave, it turned into a fight. Her mother, Olga, immediately sensed something was wrong. The daily calls stopped, texts went unanswered, and whenever she tried to see her daughter, Blake was the one who responded with excuses. When Iana did manage to speak to her mother, she admitted she felt unsafe. She said Blake was becoming unpredictable and increasingly controlling. She even stayed with her mother at the nearby apartment to gain some distance, but Blake refused to let the separation stand. The warning signs were no longer subtle. They were loud and impossible to ignore. Yet, like many new mothers caught between fear and responsibility, Iana tried to keep the peace for the sake of her child, not realizing that the danger was far closer than she ever imagined. As the days passed, the penthouse grew heavier, darker. Blake wasn't just moody anymore, he was unraveling. Friends later said it was like a different man had taken over. He stopped sleeping, barely ate, and wandered the apartment like he was trapped in his own mind. His graphic novel, Syndrome, filled with twisted tales of torture and control, consumed him entirely. Meanwhile, Iana did what any new mother would, recovering, protecting her baby, and trying to make sense of the man she had trusted. The unfinished argument. By May 20th, everything came to a head. After a terrifying argument, Iana grabbed little Diana and fled to her mother Olga's apartment, the only place she felt safe. Shaking and exhausted, she whispered the truth. "She's scared. Blake is unpredictable. I don't feel safe going back." Without hesitation, Olga called the police. Officers showed up at Blake's penthouse twice in the following days. Each time, he refused to open the door, hiding behind excuses as if nothing was wrong. With little evidence, all they could do was warn him. Iana filed a report, quietly stating she feared for her life. Yet, like many trapped between fear and hope, she still believed in the family she was trying to build. She wanted Diana to have both parents. And Blake knew exactly how to exploit that. He called. He apologized, promised he'd change, begged her to come back, just to talk. In one of the hardest decisions of her life, Iana returned. It was the last time anyone saw her alive. After that, silence. No calls, no messages, nothing. Olga sensed it immediately. A mother always knows. Hours passed. Panic set in. Calls went unanswered. Texts ignored. Finally, Olga did what she had feared. She reported her daughter missing. The police took it seriously this time. They returned to Blake's apartment. When they knocked, they heard something faint, a baby crying. Blake still didn't answer. That was the final warning. Officers broke in. What they found would shock the city. The scene you already know, the horror that started it all. This is where everything became clear. The crying baby was only the first sign that something was terribly wrong. What officers found next would define the entire case. When police finally forced their way into the penthouse, the silence inside didn't feel normal. The place wasn't trashed or chaotic. It was too still, too controlled. Something was off the moment they stepped in. The first thing they found was baby Diana in her crib, crying and weak from hunger. She had clearly been left alone for hours. Then they saw Blake. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, strangely calm. No shock, no confusion, just staring at the officers as if he'd been expecting them. And behind him was Iana. She lay on the bed under a blanket pulled almost to her neck. When officers lifted it, the truth hit them immediately. This wasn't a fight that got out of hand. The injuries were severe, intentional, and carried a level of cruelty that shook even veteran detectives. It was obvious she had endured unimaginable pain. What unsettled investigators even more was Blake's reaction. There wasn't one. He didn't flinch, didn't ask questions, didn't try to defend himself. He just sat there, detached from everything happening around him. The room showed no signs of struggle, no overturned furniture, no chaos. Whatever had happened quietly. Officers lifted the baby to safety, secured the scene, and arrested Blake on the spot. He didn't resist, he didn't speak, he didn't show a single emotion. In that moment, One thing was unmistakable. Nothing about this was accidental. The moment investigators saw Iana on that bed, they knew the truth would be confirmed in the autopsy room. But no one expected the findings to be this extreme. Even seasoned forensic examiners were shaken. Because what happened to Iana wasn't just violence. It was prolonged, calculated cruelty. The medical examiner determined Iana had lost almost all the blood in her body. Not from one single injury, but from a series of wounds that showed she had been tortured over time. Not seconds, not minutes, but hours. Her scalp had been removed. There were signs she had been held down. Bruising patterns showed she had been restrained, and her injuries matched a level of brutality that investigators rarely see in domestic cases. What stunned the forensic team even more was how controlled the injuries were. This wasn't a frenzied attack. It wasn't impulsive. Whoever hurt her took their time, step by step, wound by wound, making sure she stayed alive long enough to suffer. The cause of death was ruled exsanguination, death from blood loss. But there was something else, something that made detectives freeze. Some of Iana's injuries mirrored the same methods of torture described in Blake's own graphic novel, Syndrome, the book he had been obsessing over during those final days. It was the first real confirmation of what investigators had suspected from the moment they walked into that apartment. Blake didn't just lose control. He followed a script, one he had written long before Iana ever stepped into his life. Blake Leibel wasn't just a wealthy, troubled man. He was an artist and a creator of dark, twisted worlds. And in those worlds, the line between imagination and reality blurred. His graphic novel, Syndrome, wasn't a casual project. It was obsessive, meticulously detailed, and horrifying. The story followed a character who abducted, restrained, and tortured victims in a chillingly methodical way, and every step mirrored what Blake would later do to Iana. Investigators noticed something terrifying. The wounds on Iana's body matched passages in the book almost exactly, not in a vague way. Every detail, from the way restraints were applied to the sequence of injuries, seemed lifted straight from Blake's fictional world. It wasn't a coincidence. It was premeditated. Psychologists call this real-world scripting, when a person uses fiction as a blueprint for violent behavior. It gave them a clear insight into Blake's mindset. He was detached from reality, seeing people as characters in his story. He craved control, following his own violent narrative to the letter. The act was deliberate, not impulsive. A horrifying performance of his dark imagination. Friends and colleagues later described Blake as obsessed with perfection. He didn't just plan his novels, he lived them in his head. And Iana became, tragically, part of that living story. The Syndrome connection wasn't just a detail. It was the key to understanding how Blake could commit such a meticulously planned, unimaginably cruel act and remain calm in the aftermath. For detectives, this link between fiction and reality turned a domestic tragedy into something far darker, a case where art had become a deadly blueprint. After many investigations were carried out, the results pointed to one thing, a truth so horrifying that it left no room for doubt. And you already know where that leads. Blake Leibel would face the full weight of the law for what he had done to Iana Kasian. Blake's trial began on February 27, 2018, in a Los Angeles courtroom packed with reporters, family, and observers eager to witness the proceedings. From the very first day, all eyes were on him. Blake appeared calm, almost unnervingly so. He rarely looked at the victim's family and seemed detached. as if the courtroom drama unfolding around him was a story he was observing from the outside. Observers described his behavior as chilling, polite, composed, but strangely disconnected from reality. The prosecution presented a detailed, methodical case. They argued that Blake had meticulously planned the crime, using his graphic novel Syndrome as a blueprint for the horrific acts he committed. Digital files, drafts, and text messages were shown to the court, highlighting the disturbing parallels between his art and the reality of Iana's death. Olga, Iana's mother, gave testimony that shook everyone in the courtroom. She recounted the warning signs she had noticed, the calls that went unanswered, and the fear her daughter had expressed in the final days. She spoke of the closeness she shared with Iana, how they spoke every single day without fail, and how Blake's actions had shattered the safety and future she had dreamed for her granddaughter, Diana. Medical examiners described the injuries in clinical, precise detail. Every wound, every cut, they explained, was deliberate. This wasn't a crime of passion or a sudden rage. It was a calculated act, executed with intent and a disturbing level of precision. Detectives shared how Blake behaved after his arrest. Calm, almost mechanical, giving no indication of remorse. They described how he isolated Iana, manipulated her trust, and created a climate of fear that escalated to murder. The defense attempted to frame Blake as mentally unstable, arguing that his graphic novel and dark artistic inclinations reflected a detachment from reality rather than malice. But the prosecution countered, showing months of planning, control, and awareness of consequences. Every piece of evidence, every testimony, reinforced the premeditated nature of the crime. The jury sat in silence, absorbing the horror of each account. Witness after witness revealed the calculated cruelty, the manipulation, and the shattered life of Iana Kasian. Blake's eerie composure in court only amplified the chilling weight of the evidence. By the end of the trial, the picture was clear. This was not a crime of impulse. It was a deliberate, horrific act committed by someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The courtroom had witnessed not just a legal proceeding, but the unveiling of a mind consumed by obsession, control, and violence. After a long, tense trial, the moment everyone had been waiting for finally came. On May 1st, 2019, the jury returned with a verdict. Blake Leibel was found guilty of first-degree murder and second-degree torture. The courtroom went quiet. You could feel the weight of the tragedy settle on everyone in the room. Blake was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The brutality of his crimes, the careful planning, and the sheer cruelty left no room for leniency. Before this case, Blake had already been arrested for sexual harassment by a former girlfriend, a fact the prosecution highlighted. It wasn't just a random act of violence, it was part of a pattern. The warning signs were there long before Iana's life was stolen, and the court made that very clear. Olga, Iana's mother, sat through the trial carrying years of grief and fear. She had tried to protect her daughter, raised alarms, and yet nothing could stop the horror that unfolded. Finally, she heard the words guilty.
We, the jury, find the defendant guilty of the crime of torture.
And while justice had been served, it didn't erase the heartbreak. The prosecution meticulously walked the jury through Blake's obsession, his graphic novel Syndrome, the way he isolated Iana, and the warning signs Olga had seen. Medical examiners described the torture. Detectives explained the chilling timeline. Piece by piece, the story of Iana's final days was laid bare. Blake's behavior in court was eerily calm. No apologies, no emotion, just a cold detachment that made the horror of his actions feel even more real. Outside the courtroom, the reaction was raw. People were shocked, angry, heartbroken, and many were left thinking about the warning signs that had been missed. For Olga, the verdict didn't bring her daughter back, but it was a small relief. Blake would never be able to hurt anyone else. Diana, though forever affected, could now grow up in a world where her mother's legacy of love and courage would guide her. Iana's story is a chilling reminder that danger can lurk where we least expect it. Her legacy lives on through Diana, and the lessons of her life are ones we can't ignore. Stay tuned for more stories like this that will shock and haunt you.